G'day and welcome to another massive edition of VFL 23. We're rocking and rolling through the pre-season. My name's Rhodesy and I'm joined by the great man, not in the flesh this week, Brendan Jonty Rhodes. Rhodesy, you're back in Victoria, mate. How did you cope with the hot and chaos up here in southeast Queensland?
Well, it was certainly humid enough, that was for sure. But no, it was absolutely fantastic to be there. Just one small issue was a few friends that I managed to pick up, if you can see that, at a certain accommodation establishment in Southport South. But that's about all we need to say. No, it was absolutely fantastic to be up there. Great, as we said, hospitality from the Sharks. We're back in our boring lounge rooms again now, and yeah, ready to crank up with, what are we, 9 days to go to the first game.
Absolutely, it's coming up so quick, and it started in a blaze of glory earlier on this week where we had the VFL launch over at Icon Park, and it was just exciting to see the captains from the VFL and VFLW programs and some of the umpires getting down there and being a part of all of this festivities to build up to a big season ahead.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful to see, and a couple of guest speakers, which was great. One of which was the new Bull Ants coach, Brodie Holland, who basically said they've had a player turnover of 26 from last year to this year in a squad of 44, I think it is. So it's completely new look Northern Bull Ants team. So we need to show a bit of patience with them, but yeah, they've had a pretty good pre-season so far. So hopefully they can do well, but yeah, no, it's always a great night there at Icon Park or wherever it's held to get everyone together and crank it up for the start of the season, which is getting very, very close now.
One of the things I do love that we see is just the premiership flag handed over at that point in time. I did see some footage on the socials there, and I think it's just something special to be recognised amongst all the peers, the captains of the opposition, and I think provides a little bit more spice to go, the captains are there going, I want to be able to be in that situation in 12 months' time. I think it's a really good way to take the premiership flag from the previous year's win and in front of all the opposition captains. I think it's just a good way to spice up the year.
Certainly fuel the hunger, wouldn't it? That's for sure, and it'll fuel the hunger a little bit more when it rises up the flagpole at Casey Fields next Saturday afternoon against Footscray.
Absolutely, it's going to be a fantastic game, but there's still
and of course, the Essendon game as well.
There's still going to be a little bit
VFLW game as well.
That's going to be very very special. I know with the Mighty Bombers, I've got the Guernsey hanging up in the background, and Rhodesy and I are going toe to toe this week too because he's a Sydney fan. I'm wearing the Gold Coast top. I've somewhat moved to the region. I've adopted them as my second favourite team, so I'm displaying one of their shirts today during the broadcast. In fact, it was my housewarming present to myself. The day I got the keys was the day that the shirt was there right as well. And I know I cannot wait personally to get out to Heritage Bank on April 2 and call the big game between Gold Coast and Geelong. I think that's going to be very special when the VFL really start that one. But trying to get a bit for that, but we did see some VFLW action on the weekend, mate. Talk us through what happened and who were some of the standout performers.
Yeah, 5 VFLW games in the Rebel competition, the pre-season on the weekend, and the big winner, you would have to say, was the Box Hill Hawks. Put simply, after beating the grand finalist Southern Saints last week, they've now beaten the premiers in Essendon in a comprehensive game. In the end, they led by a point at quarter time, 7 at half time. They blew out to a 17-point lead at 3/4 time. The Bombers came charging back with the first 2 goals of the last quarter, got within 5, and as we spoke about last week, when Essendon gets on a roll, they're very, very hard to stop. They just know how to win. But the Hawks had the answers. And late goals to Maddie Boyd and Amanda Tassari meant that Box Hill got up by 11 points, 7-5-47 to 6 straight 36. So good kicking from the Bombers. But the Hawks, very happy, I would say, to come out of their pre-season campaign with 2 wins over last year's grand finalists, having been rated so highly under the Hawthorn banner last year before falling away in the finals. Boyd herself finished with 4 goals in a best on ground display. So some promising signs there for the Hawks, and as I said, a very good result for them.
Absolutely, it sounds fantastic, and obviously too. I mean, people read what they want to in practice matches, but I think, well, what we're seeing at Box Hill this year, we've seen Hawthorn being put in lights of the AFLW team with the gun recruits that they've got on board for next year, for next season, with a couple of premiership players coming across. If you're a Box Hill fan, you're very excited about what's going to happen around your footy club this year, particularly in the women's space, aren't you? Regardless of whether it's practice matches or the season proper.
Yeah, definitely. Well, while we're talking about the Box Hill Hawks, actually, we do have some horrible news, which has only just broken this morning with the Hawks. They have lost their key centre-half back recruit from the Northern Bull Ants in Bend of Bolfo, and also their most exciting forward in Ben Kavara, who have both injured ACLs and will miss the season. Both those injuries have happened at training over the past period of time. So horrible news for the Hawks to lose those 2 players. And Box Hill, we'll talk more about them in the season preview next week. But with Fergus Green now likely to be playing a fair bit of football for Hawthorn, with Mitch Lewis up there being out for a few weeks, that's potentially 90 goals out of the Box Hill forward line. And yeah, so we certainly send our thoughts to the 2 Bens and the guys at the Box Hill Footy Club as they prepare for their recoveries and a long 2023 season in the rehab ward.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be tough for them, and hopefully they can still be involved in the footy club. It's as you hear about with a lot of stories with significant injuries in this capacity, that there's a lot of work done on your own to recover during rehab, and you hear that particularly in the AFL circles, is that you watch all your teammates out on the track doing their bits, and you've got your program that you need to adhere to. So it's a very tough life. We'll turn our attention back to the VFLW with some of the other games you had on the weekend. We spoke about Box Hill's win over Essendon. What else did we have take place over the weekend?
The preliminary final rematch took place. Obviously a practice match, so a little bit less riding on it than the last time they met. But the Casey Demons took on the Southern Saints, and the Saints, of course, who came from 5th last year to make the grand final. They knocked out the Hawks. They knocked out the Demons on the way. They've now lost to both of those teams in the pre-season. Casey coming from 22 to 24 points down at 3-quarter time, kicking 3 goals to 1 in the last quarter and getting up by 8. So Casey 6-5-41 defeated the Southern Saints 5-3-33. So after going down to Essendon by a point last week, the Demons have bounced back with a win over the Saints. So they'll be pretty confident, the preliminary finalists, heading into the season as well. Geelong, their accuracy was a real key factor. They beat the Western Bulldogs. Same number of scoring shots down at Deakin University. Geelong 6-2-38 over the Bulldogs 2-6-18. The Bulldogs, however, they had a bit they could take out of it. They kicked 2 goals, 2-0 against Geelong in the 3rd quarter. So for a team that didn't win a game last year and left the season with a percentage on the ladder of around about 16, it's those little wins that they can use to build on heading into this year under the new captain in Mary Sandrell. And we certainly wish her all the best. I am a friend of the family, Mary Sandrell, from the town of Oakland. The Sandrells are actually legendary football people up that way. And in fact, let me get this right, her great-grandfather, Jim, was a member of the Melbourne Premiership teams in the late 1950s. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good pedigree there. Uncle Dennis played over 300 Ovens and Murray games for Corowa Rutherglen and is a legend there. And Anthony, her father, a very, very good player as well in Ovens and Murray football and in the old Kareen League. So she's carrying on on the tradition there. So good luck to Mary and congratulations to everyone from Oaklands and the Sandrell family there. A little bit of name dropping there, I suppose you could call it. But yeah, she's
you know your footy, mate.
Exactly. She's a key forward there at the Dogs. And yeah, so we certainly hope she goes well in that role. Carlton and Collingwood took on each other at Icon Park. It was the Blues all the way, knocking off a finals team from last year, and the premiers they would have been the premiers from the year before, I believe, if the grand final had have gone ahead. Carlton 6-5-41, defeating Collingwood 3-3-21. They led by 13 points at quarter time and never looked back. So cruising through to a good victory there. And the most impressive team in the pre-season has been Williamstown, who finished second last year, just the 2.5 wins. They've had another big win on Friday night against the arch rivals in Port Melbourne, the Borough, who had a good win themselves last week over Darebin. No match for the Seagulls on Friday night. Williamstown 8-7-55, defeating Port Melbourne 3-3-21. So some really good confidence to take into the season for Williamstown.
Super exciting stuff for them. And again, as we praise all the great work they did last year on YouTube, it was good to go through the off-season and sit back and watch some VFLW footy and some of their highlights across the year. Have we got some games taking place this weekend, mate? I know I think we're obviously only a week and a bit away from the season starting itself, but have we got teams hitting the track this weekend? It's a bit of a last tune-up.
VFLW.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, and that is the Western Bulldogs, who are playing their second practice match only. Their first one was against Geelong last week. They are taking on the team we were just talking about in Williamstown. Yep. That is at an old VFA iconic venue of Skinner Reserve in Braybrook.
Nice.
The old ground of the Sunshine Crows back in the day. It's had a big refurbishment. The Western Bulldogs are training there at the moment while Whitten Oval itself gets redone. And the Bulldogs / Footscray are having a double header of practice matches there this weekend. 10:30 on Saturday morning, Western Bulldogs versus Williamstown at Skinner Reserve. So if you're in the area, get out there and have a look at that one before the men. An actual round one preview, would you believe? You don't see that very often. Footscray taking on Casey Demons. That is at 2:30 at the same venue. So plenty of footy at Skinner Reserve. But yeah, the only the one VFLW game in the last week before the season.
Sound sensational, mate. That's super exciting. And for those who are joining us, we do appreciate your support over the last 4 weeks. We're into episode 5 now, I think. You can now listen to us on iTunes now. We've got that fired up during the week, Spotify, all the others, iHeartRadio, plenty of other streaming platforms as we look to expand and grow this product. And we do appreciate the support of those actively going out of their way to engage with the work that we're trying to do to help elevate and promote the VFL and VFLW programs. We're doing this to show some great support for the teams that really need it, and we're all geared up and really encouraged about the support that we've got and looking for a big season ahead. As we turn our attention to week 3 results in the VFL practice matches, mate, it all started with Port Melbourne and Carlton, and what an interesting contest that ended up being, particularly given the Port Melbourne only just got over the line.
Yeah, last kick of the game by reports from the Blues socials. It was a tight game, a low-scoring game in difficult conditions last Thursday night at Icon Park. Port Melbourne did their best to kick themselves out of the game. It must be said, especially in the second quarter, I think it was, they kicked 2 goals 10 to half time, and at that stage they led by 4 points. It looked like Carlton was getting on top in the third quarter. They got themselves to a couple of point lead, 4-7 to 3-11. But it was the Borough who had the answers with that late goal, 5-13-43 over Carlton, 5-8-38. The Borough didn't record any details for themselves of that game, unfortunately. But Blues fans will be very happy to know that the best 4 players on the ground were their returning AFL-listed players from injury in Mitch McGovern, who dominated across halfback, Mark Pitnet, who was very impressive in the ruck, Jack Martin, who played on the ball, looked very good and kicked a goal, and the youngster in Josh Honey, who kicked a couple of goals as well. So some good signs there for Carlton as they move into the season, despite not getting the money.
Southport took on Palm Beach Currumbin in Palm Beach Currumbin's first hit out for season 2023 in their practice matches in the AFL Queensland competition, the QAFL. Steamy night last Thursday night over at the Tank, and Southport 18-3, 111-6, 6-42. And I say steamy night because it was about 28 degrees and 70% humidity at least for the majority of that game. So very, very tough conditions, even from Queensland perspective, and being night footy. And I had the pleasure of going down there and watching the game, mate, and I spent most of the time dodging the beetles that were trying to hit the light tower. So it was that gave you an idea of what the conditions are like, but it was super hot out there. But Southport, mate, did not find kicking all too terrible despite the slippery conditions.
Yeah, 18 goals, 111. That's a fantastic sign that they can kick so well, especially when so many other teams didn't do so well with their accuracy. I think, if I'm scanning through the results, the Casey Demons and North Melbourne and Essendon, out of 16 teams to play, were the only ones to kick more goals than behind. So to kick 18-3 is a wonderful effort, and it shows the depth of Southport, doesn't it? Because apart from the returning big man in Fraser Thurlow, they pretty much played their young development team. Noah Bradshaw, the son of Daniel, who came up from Collingwood, he kicked a couple of goals, looked very good from all reports. So that's a good sign for them. A young fella by the name of Finch kicked 3 as well, and I heard may have played himself onto the list, which is what that game was all about. But yeah, good signs for Southport, winning by 69 points. As I said, 18-3, 111 to 6, 42. But I'm sure the Lions would have got plenty out of it as well.
Yeah, they certainly did. They had some names returning to actually playing in the fold that day. We saw Spud Frawley running around and David Armitage. I also want to give a shout out to Harry Law, who kicked a goal there for the Sharks. He was another one of the players, the young guns, playing his way onto the list. He got some really good tutelage last year under Nick Malcheski over at Labrador after crossing up from the Central Victorian region. So in the space of, sort of 12 to 15 months, he's turned his life around in the sense that he's played his way into a VFL list after playing country footy in Victoria. So you always like hearing little success stories like that. Sandringham, 12-14-86, defeated Richmond 8-8-56. So I'll be seeing Sandringham in action in a couple of weeks' time. What do you read out of that game, mate?
An extremely good result for the Zebras, this one. Richmond, neither team played any AFL-listed players. So whether you take a lot of it, going forward into the season, but for Sandringham, this is the side that they're going to be fielding a fair bit throughout the season, given that St Kilda has 14 players on their injury list already. So St Kilda is not going to be able to supply a lot to Sandringham. So to see the young Zebras fire up and get the job done in convincing fashion, mind you, they led by 2 goals at quarter time, 2 goals at halftime, 4 goals at 3/4 time, and 1 by 5. So extended. Just looking at quickly, they won every quarter, extended their lead at every change, 12-14-86 to 8-8-56. So, again, I don't have any details about who played well for the Zebras. They're another club that doesn't really record them, and something we're working on to fix up before the preseason games take place next year. But getting the results up on VFL.com.au for the first time as well, which we didn't do previously. We've got a step forward, and we'll have another step forward into next year. So a very good result for Sandringham. Richmond, however, couldn't be disappointed either. Lachlan Johnson, the son of the Brisbane Lions premiership legend in Chris, spent a couple of years on Essendon's AFL list without playing a game, crossed to Richmond last year. They've repurposed him as a forward this season, and he's kicked 4 goals in this game. So a good sign for him. And the young centre-half back in Mutaz El Noor, who's crossed from the Northern Bull Ants, was another one to really impress for the Tigers.
Sensational. I want to make a point of Sandringham too, with St Kilda's list being depleted even before the round 1 action this weekend. It provides some great opportunities for the local players around the Sandringham region through the local competitions. I think there might be the Southern Footy League down there and some of the surrounding leagues to get the opportunity to play in a VFL environment, and some of them might be able to sustain themselves a little bit longer, so that they're, as we speak about, St Kilda's injury list gets a little bit problematic in the mid-season, and we see some of these players from the local leagues start to impress, and there's a couple of spots available, then you just never know. Someone from the Southern Footy League could very well be playing for the St Kilda Footy Club in the back half of the year. It's a bad situation, but also a good situation for the club for some of the younger players to get more senior experience at AFL level, while bringing players up from the local leagues as well to have that VFL exposure, because as we've talked about at length, there is a lot more players getting drafted through the VFL system than probably ever before, particularly over the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
And yeah, exactly. And these players at the top end of the Southern League, and also the Southern-based clubs in the VAFA down around that area, we know how good the Beau Morris Footy Club is at producing players. They're just around the corner from Sandringham. They've got, I think, just off the top of my head, they might even have double figures on AFL lists at the moment, or certainly not far from it. So these guys are seeing, and Cheltenham just down the road, 5 players on VFL lists this year. Those lists can improve and can lift. And yeah, you're exactly right. There'll be mid-season draft potential available if they come into Sandringham or Frankston and get an opportunity and play some good footy.
Absolutely. And if you're the St Kilda Footy Club, well, you've got these players training at the club, so you've got them right under your nose, which is a good sign, and again something we've spoken about at length over the journey. We'll sort of push through the next few ones pretty quickly, mate. But Williamstown had a solid win over Box Hill Hawks by 61 points, and you mentioned earlier the unfortunate injuries for the Hawks that'll derail some of their progress this season, with some of their stars going down with injuries.
Yeah, agree with that. Williamstown outstanding in this game against the Hawks. The Hawks had 3 AFL listed players, not necessarily their guys are hoping to play in round 1. That's why they played for an extra run in Cooper Stevens, who came across from Geelong. Emerson Jecker was another one as well. So they played. They did all right from all reports, but Williamstown in dominant form, 15-16, 106 to the Hawks, 6-9-45. Corey Ellison, the premiership fullback from the Casey Demons, played forward as he did, I think, once. He kicked 6 goals in a half once for the Casey Demons. He kicked 3 in the first quarter and 4 for the game in this contest. So terrific player, can be used at both ends of the ground, and he's going to add another dimension to Williamstown in a best on ground effort. Ben Andrews out of the Sandringham Dragons too, very good in defence for the Seagulls. Sorry, I was just going to move straight through to the next game, where Casey Demons played a development team against Coburg, a young under-23s lineup. And again, they put in a strong performance. Coburg will feel they should have won this game. They had 24 scoring shots to 17, but blazed away and in the usual windy conditions out at Casey Fields and missed their opportunity. Casey got away with an 8-point win, 10-7-67 to the Lions, 7-17-59. So there's the big difference between Southport 18-3, Coburg 7-17. You'd hope that they get that a little bit better off once you get into the season. Muley kicking 3 goals. Tommy Sheridan, another guy who's come in from local footy this year, got his opportunity, kicked a couple, looked very good as well. For Coburg, young Sam Mason, another key forward out of local footy, kicked a couple. Jesse Cariliano, the new captain, and Braden Gillard, I think, runner-up in the best and fairest last year, first and second in the best and fairest. They were the best two players on the ground for Coburg, as was Flynn Gentili was in there as well. So Coburg would be happy enough, but just with a bit to clean up in front of goals.
Fantastic. It's what you go through with the practice match phase. Werribee, 16-point winners over Geelong.
Yeah, good result again for the Tigers. Coming from behind at three-quarter time, a couple of points down. They kicked 4-1 in the last quarter, which is a good sign for them down at GMHBA Stadium. 7-11-53 over the Cats, 5-7-37. Sam Pia kicked a couple of goals. Jack Henderson, Kai DeClace, Tom Gribble, the usual suspects, leading the way for Werribee. Jordan Burke, who I'm not sure, but might be son of David, who played for the Cats back in the 90s. He was their best player. Oscar Morrison, who's come home from Port Melbourne, very good as well. North Melbourne for the second week in a row, this time with a new, both teams playing without a lot of their AFL listed players. But the Kangaroos beat Footscray for the second week in a row, 15-12, 102 to 10 goals, 12, 72. They did the damage in the third quarter when they kicked 6 goals to 3 to run away with that one. Young fella, Hope, kicked 3 goals, but their AFL listed players that did line up were their best. Aidan Core, Dan Howe, Curtis Taylor, Aaron Hall coming back from injury, and Taron Thomas played pretty well also and has been cleared of ankle damage after limping off the ground late in the game. One more before we head to the break. It was a big week of practice matches, and it was an easy win for Essendon over Frankston out at the Hangar on Saturday. 14 goals, 8-92 to 6-10, 46. A 46-point win there for the Bombers. They did the damage with 6 goals to 2 in the first quarter. And then with the wind again in the third quarter, they kicked another 6 goals to 1. So that was where the difference was. Frankston fought the game out well with Trent Minot being their best player. Will Fordham in his first game for the season after off-season knee surgery. He kicked a couple and got through and looked all right as well. Matt Guelphy, who's trying to force his way into the round 1 team for Essendon, was the Bombers' best player.
Sensational. And I'll have a look at the before we go to the break, I'll have a look at the week 4 fixture of practice matches. Starting on Thursday night as a curtain raiser to the big stuff at the MCG, but Richmond v Carlton over at Punt Road, that kicks off at 4 p.m. So if you're heading over the G, make sure you duck over to Punt Road, just right there in that MCG sanctum there. You can go and check that out, so get bang for your buck there. Saturday, whole range of matches. North v Williamstown over at Arden Street from 10 a.m. Brisbane Lions v Southport Sharks over at Springfield from 12 p.m. A game that was...
That's a reschedule.
Correct, and that was changed during the week. Sandringham v Werribee are over at Moorabbin from 2 p.m. Collingwood v Geelong over at AIA Centre from 2. Frankston Academy v Beau Morris over at Seaford from 12 p.m. and that will be followed by Frankston v the Northern Bull Ants from the senior side from 2:30 p.m. Footscray v Casey.
Before you go any further, sorry, Yeendy. We'll just talk about that one. The original schedule did have Frankston playing Beau Morris. They've slotted in the second game, so the seniors, as you said, play the Bull Ants at 2:30. The Frankston Beau Morris game was going to be at 2. That's come forward to 12, as you just mentioned. So get out there early. The Frankston Academy is a great initiative. We'll actually talk about that at some stage during the season and give them a bit of a plug, because it's a great thing they're doing that's going to set up the Dolphins for the future.
Absolutely, and if it's going by any of the success that we've seen over the last 12 months with so many players getting put onto AFL lists, it's certainly an initiative worth enjoying. Footscray v Casey Demons over at Braybrook at 2:30 p.m. in the fixture, the double header that Rhodesy alluded to earlier. Gold Coast v the Sydney University over at Osworld Centre from 3 p.m. And on Sunday, just a couple of games, GWS v the Sydney Swans over at Tom Wills Oval at Sydney Olympic Park from 9:30, and the Bombers v the Hawks over at the Hangar from 10 a.m. Stick around and join us after the break, and it's all thanks to you guys here as a VFL 23. Make sure you catch us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the other streaming platforms. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to VFL 23, and for those who are joining us for the first time, we appreciate your company wherever you may be consuming this platform. A couple of weeks ago, we looked at the first 6 teams of the VFLW competition. Now we're going to look at the second lot of the teams as we gear up for a big season of the VFLW. And Rhodesy, we're going to look at Geelong. Talk us through about what we're going to expect from them, who's coaching, and what's their season looking like this year.
An interesting one for Geelong. They finished, I think, 4th after the home and away season. They were the first victim of the Southern Saints' amazing run through the finals from 5th to the decider. They ended up 5th at the end of last year, which puts them into that middle bracket of teams in the fixture. So they will play Collingwood, Darebin and North Melbourne twice. At least Coventry, and a terrific AFLW footballer for Geelong and VFLW before that. She takes the reins as coach for her first season in charge. They've got themselves a good draw to start. They'll be confident of getting off to a good start, potentially even winning the first 6 games, if they can get themselves off to a good start. But the rest of the season is when it gets a little bit tougher. They play North Melbourne at home in round 1, Carlton away, Darebin. So the first 3 games are against non-finalists from last year. They have a good record against the Southern Saints, and then they take on the Bulldogs and the Kangaroos again. So that's the fixture they'd be looking at before they run into Essendon, Casey, Box Hill, Collingwood a couple of times later on in the year. I see they'll be definitely around the mark again. They've recruited a couple of AFLW players. I'm not sure whether they're taking the next step up the table, but they'll be somewhere around that mark again of 3 to probably 7 or 8. They'll be hard to beat down there at Deakin University, that's for sure.
It's imperative for this club to start strongly. If they can get 5 wins in the first 6 weeks, then that might build them up with some momentum and confidence to be able to tackle and maybe even beat a lot of the teams ahead of them in the back end of the season. So the way to judge this team is how they start, and if they build up that momentum, they could very well surprise the competition and maybe contend for even a top 4 spot.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's what you really need. It's an interesting fixture. The top 2 have a significant advantage, but if you can get yourself into first or second, you're guaranteed a double chance. If you get yourself into third and win the first final, then you pick up the double chance in the second week of the top 6 system. So some would say that third is just as valuable, if maybe even more so than second, even though there is the possibility of being eliminated in week 1 if the bottom 3 teams all get up.
North Melbourne will be led into the season 2023 under Steph Binder, who is in her 2nd season. The Roos finished 7th last year with a record of 6 and 8. How do you see them heading into this year?
Again, as with Geelong, it's the first half of the year that will decide how they go. They've done pretty well in the practice matches so far. They're in that same group, the Cats, as I said, Collingwood, Darebin, Geelong in that middle group. If they can get past that round 1 game against Geelong down there, they could even look at reaching 7-0. Although the second week is now not looking like a win that they could have penciled in, with Williamstown having such a great start, pre-season comp. Western Bulldogs, Carlton, Darebin, and then Geelong again, and then Port Melbourne. So the first half of the season, the Cats twice are the only team they play that made the finals last year. So that's where they need to make hay, Steph Binder's team. So that the second half of the year, a bit tougher. The last 3 games, however, are at home. So Southern Saints, Darebin and Collingwood. So if they can get themselves into reasonable shape, I reckon they are a real live chance to be the one, if there's going to be one, to push into the top 6 this year.
We'll be excited to see their development, especially with that start, like we highlighted with Geelong. Port Melbourne under a sort of Sean was Bunkle. He's into his second season. They had a tough year last year, finishing in 10th with 3 wins, 11 losses. How do you assess their draw, and can they bounce back from their 2022 slump?
Yeah, their first year they did very well. Their very first year as a club, they made the finals with a large group of Richmond AFLW players doubling up with them. They didn't have that last year. There was only, I don't think they ever had more than a handful that played, and that made things a lot tougher for them. They've had a couple of good results in the pre-season, but again, with the season being different now to the AFLW, you're not going to see a lot of AFLW players playing for any of the clubs throughout the majority of the season. So that gives, that puts Port more on a bit of a level playing field. They did drop into that bottom group, that bottom 4 of teams. So their double up games are against Carlton, Western Bulldogs and Williamstown. We just saw Williamstown look like they could be a big improver, but they will see themselves as improving. I expect them to improve. They'll be tougher to beat. Carlton, Collingwood, Williamstown, Western Bulldogs in the first month of the season gives them a golden opportunity to get off to a solid start. If they can win 2 or 3 of those, that gives them some momentum. But they will want to wrap up a final spot before the last couple of rounds, because they play Essendon and Casey in the last 2 games, in which they'll be rank underdogs. So the job once again has to be done early and then through the middle of the year for Port. Not sure if they can make it back up to the 6, but they'll certainly be harder to beat than they were last year.
That's what we want to see. We're all about seeing development and improvement from one season to the next, and they're only babies in this competition, so their best footy as a club is still ahead of them, and all about developing the talent to come into the team over the next couple of years. Southern Saints will be stinging after the 2022 decider against the Bombers. They'll be led by a new coach this year, and mate, I will say, with the reigning grand finalists for both teams, they've both got new coaches. With Michelle Densley taking over from Dale Robertson, that's an interesting move by the club after the success they had last year.
It is. Well, in Brendan Major's case, he was coach of Essendon for the whole 5 years of their existence, and also coached Eastern Devils for a few years before that. So he'd done a great job. He's headed for a well-earned break, I believe. Dale Robinson got promoted onto the St Kilda coaching staff after her wonderful season. So Michelle Densley, it's going to be much of the same. She's a very, very highly rated coach, highly decorated. She was assistant there to Robinson last year, so it's more of the same. Continuing on, that run through the finals, which got them to the grand final. Yes, the grand final result where they didn't kick a goal is really going to sting and provide some motivation. It also puts them into that top bracket of the fixture, which makes things a bit tougher. They play Box Hill Hawks twice. They play Casey Demons twice. They play Essendon twice. So that's going to make things a bit harder. They've lost a couple of important players just in the recent trade week, whether they were going to be playing a lot of football in the in this season. But they didn't have a lot of AFLW players last year either. What they did was they had a settled squad of VFLW players throughout the whole year, and that's what helped them through the finals. When the AFLW players from the other clubs went into cotton wool, the Southern Saints were able to keep rolling through. So they they do have the toughest fixture, as I just mentioned. 3 home games in a row from rounds 2 to 4 will shape their season. Essendon, Box Hill, and Geelong. If they can get through and win a couple of those, they'll be set up for the rest of the year. If they struggle through that period and find themselves potentially, they've got Darebin away in the first game, which they'll start favourite in. They could potentially find the next 4 tough: Essendon, Box Hill, Geelong, and then Casey. They would really want to be 3-2, 2-3 at the very, very worst. If they fall to 1-4, it's a long, long, long way back for them. So that's where it'll be decided, especially with consecutive away games against the Demons, Bombers, and Magpies in rounds 5, 7, and 9. And 3 of the last 4 on the road too. So if they repeat what they did last year, they'll well and truly have earned it.
So it's an exciting time for the club, especially as we're already seeing the development of coaches going up into the AFL system. So we're already seeing the benefits of the VFLW program in that alone. Rhodesy here takes over from Kirby Bentley for the Western Bulldogs, who unfortunately, as you've mentioned a number of times over the last few weeks, that Nova will not be available, and the Bulldogs, who didn't get a chance to win a game last year, aside from their opener over at Mars Stadium, they're going to be playing all their home games over at Port Melbourne. What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Obviously very tough for the Bulldogs in a season where they'll be desperate to bounce back. We know they're coming from a long, long way back, and without a home ground, they've got the second hardest fixture as well. Casey out at Ballarat, as you mentioned, in round 1, Box Hill in round 2. It could be a very hard start to the year for them. We want to see improvement. We want to see development from the young team coming through. We want to see green shoots. They're not going to be bouncing back and making the finals, I wouldn't have thought. What they haven't officially revealed yet is that I believe they've got 5, 6, potentially a couple more players coming down for the season out of the Northern Territory women's competition. Mm-hmm. That is still to be officially announced, but that will help. That will definitely help some experienced heads to come down and help the young girls. We've mentioned Mary Sandrell earlier on as the experience up forward. I'd say if they can come out and win a couple of games this year, that'll be a good step forward for them and something they can build on.
We'll be watching with great interest. Hopefully they can secure a few wins under their belt. So we turn our attention to the big improvers, and pre-season form is pre-season form, but a win is a win, and this team is coming with a bullet attached to them, or a rocket attached to them. Williamstown, under new coach Liam Kavanagh, who's replacing Penny Keller-Reid. It seems to be that Liam is doing great things for that footy club, and look out.
He is certainly showing that already. He's crossed over from Coburg. He was the inaugural women's coach at the Lions over the past 2 seasons. They were leading, I think, the competition in 2021 when it was called off in the Southern League, and then last year they led the ladder all year and lost by a point in the grand final. So Kavanagh gets his chance. He's brought quite a few of those Coburg girls across to Williamstown with him, bringing that winning culture. That's a really good sign. They've had some terrific wins in the pre-season. The first 2 weeks, crucial for them as they try to build a bit of momentum. They play Collingwood away, North Melbourne away in their first 2 games. If they can get through those 1-1 or even 2-0, because we don't know a lot about what Collingwood's going to produce. North Melbourne started all right. Then they can really start to build something. Port Melbourne, Darebin, Carlton, all non-finalists last year. So they look all right. Or if as I said, if they can get that good start, continue the momentum through that they've had in the pre-season, they can really make a potential push towards the bottom half of the top 6. They don't have to play Essendon, Casey, or Geelong away. The the premiers and the 2 longest journeys in the competition. So that's a win in the fixture for them as well. Yeah, good luck to Liam Kavanagh and the girls there in their bid to produce their best ever season in the Rebel VFLW.
Absolutely, certainly going to be exciting for them. A lot of the unknown about them, it is making it great to watch and see their development. For those who are watching on YouTube, you can see the Sydney Kings banner plastered behind Rhodesy there, because there's a time of recording. We are on the eve. He's got the cap on too. Look at him go. We're all fired up by the NBL. They've got Game 5 tonight here on the Wednesday night, and it's certainly going to be exciting. No doubt, I'm surprised you didn't head up there to get a ticket, Rhodesy, but I think getting tickets up there...
all my money in Queensland, mate.
That's right. I think getting a ticket up there in Sydney would have just been impossible, given the records that the NBL has celebrated over the last couple of weeks, but... Nothing like the records we're seeing happening with the VFL, with great participation, great crowd numbers, and I'm going to take some news coming out of AFL Queensland this week, and I'll drop it in because I just want to highlight that football is alive and well in this region. According to the Oz Kick details that have just come out, AFL Queensland has broken all of its previous records, and in terms of its participation, out of all of its numbers, it has a 28% of participants are females, which is the highest in any state in the country. Mate, it is exciting to see, particularly up here, a non-football state breaking records and growing in participation at grassroots level.
Oh, absolutely magnificent. That is the best possible news. Music to the ears of anyone who follows football, to see Queensland going great guns. New South Wales are going great guns. We haven't got their figures, of course, at the moment, but they're producing plenty coming through as well. And that's what we want. We want footy to be the number one sport. We believe it is. We know it's the best game. There's no question about that.
Yep.
We just need the people who were brought up on other sports. We understand why they follow the other sports, because that's what they were brought up on. That's all they know. But they're starting to learn, and it starts with the kids, as you said. It starts with the kids. You bring them through at the bottom. They introduce them to the game, and they are the ones who support it for life. Their kids come through. It's not something that happens overnight. You've got to develop it, and there's been a lot of work go on in both those 2 states over the last 20 years, 30 years even. To help develop that, and that's just magnificent to see.
Fantastic, and it's magnificent to see you, mates, all fired up, especially ahead of Game 5 in the NBL and what is going to be the final week of practice matches of the VFL and VFLW program. Thanks so much for your company, everyone. Make sure you join us on VFL 23, and I know, mate, you are pumped. You're ready to go. You cannot wait to get to your first game in a couple of weeks' time. Have you been doing some practicing over the last couple of weeks, just sort of in the mirror, in the car, ahead of the preparations?
La, 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 la.
He's ready for a VFLW Grand Final, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Take it to the bank. Thanks so much for your company, everyone. Make sure you join us next week on VFL 23.